Hello, I'm Emma and I'm about to show you my favourite art material in the whole world, watercolour. I love watercolour for so many reasons. It's beautiful, glowing and unpredictable. It surprises you all the time. It's also easy to use at home or at school. You don't really need any special equipment and it's quite easy to clean up if you have an accident. Before we get started, you're going to need to go and get some things. You need 2 pots of water. You could use jam jars or old yoghurt pots or anything really. And then you need a paintbrush and some paper. Use the thickest paper you've got. Get a bit of kitchen roll or toilet paper too. And you're going to need some watercolours, of course. Watercolours come in 2 forms, pans or tubes. Either is fine and I'll explain how to use them both. If you don't have any watercolours at home, don't worry. Any other kind of paint will do, whatever you've got. And if you don't have any paint, there are still some things you might find at home that will work. For example, you could use coffee, or tea, or food colouring. Maybe even soy sauce or another kind of sauce. But something watery rather than creamy or greasy would be the best. If you do make a coffee or a tea to paint with, make sure it's very strong and don't put any milk in. Right, are you ready? First of all, we need to mix up our paints. To mix watercolour pans, that's the little hard round or square shaped paints, stick your brush in some water and then put it on the surface of that hard pan and scrub vigorously. Really scrub hard and use lots of water, more than you think, until you get a nice rich fluid colour on the top of that pan. If you're using tubes, squeeze a tiny bit out onto a palette or your plate or something plastic from the recycling if you haven't got a palette. You only need a tiny bit, about the same amount as a garden pea. Now get plenty of water and mix it up thoroughly. It's very important that there are no sticky or lumpy bits left. All of that paint should be dissolved until it's completely watery and doesn't feel sticky. So, now we're going to explore what you can do with watercolour. Let's begin by making some lines and squiggles and shapes on the page. What can you do with your brush? Can you stroke, wiggle, splatter? Can you use the side of your brush? Could you paint just using the tip of your brush? Some artists don't use brushes at all. The famous painter William Turner was known to use his fingers. Could you try painting with your fingers, or the wrong end of a pencil, or a feather, or a stick? So even if you don't have a paintbrush, there's no excuse not to paint. What happens if you let one colour touch another on the page? That can look very interesting. Now we're going to try one of my favourite techniques. It's called the wet in wet technique. Here's how you do it. First, dip your brush in your water pot and paint plain water onto the page. Make a circle or a wiggly shape. And now you've got to act fast. Get some paint on your brush and touch the watery shape you made. Watch it spread. Don't interfere. Just let the paint do its thing and flow around on the watery shape. You could introduce another colour. Maybe you could pick up your paper and move it around a bit. But don't brush it with your brush. Let the paint do its own thing. That's what I love about this technique. Less is more. You could try using different shapes, different colours, several colours, and see what happens. I'm going to leave it to you now. Carry on finding out what you can do with the watercolour. How many different ways can you use your brush? What's it like when you just let the watercolour spread itself around on the paper? Discover what you like doing and take some time to get to know how the watercolour works. Enjoy yourself. Don't worry about trying to make a pretty picture or to make it look like anything in particular. What we're doing here is experimenting just to find out what happens.